Welcome back, Razorback Nation, to episode 24 of Hawgs on the Hill, your go-to podcast for an in-depth dive into all things Arkansas Razorbacks. Join us as we dissect the victories, analyze all the plays, and revel in the spirit of the Hogs. Episode 24 is brought to you by Homefield. Step into the legacy of collegiate style with Homefield's premium vintage apparel. Embrace the spirit of your alma mater or even just your favorite team with their meticulously crafted, comfortable, and stylish collections. Elevate your game day attire and celebrate the rich history of college sports. Homefield, where tradition meets modern comfort in every stitch. Use promo code Variety Sports in all caps to receive 15% off that first order. They've got fantastic things out there. Plenty of slobber hog items for basketball season. They're dropping new vintage like pullovers, windbreaker type things for coaches type jackets. And, they have great like wintertime pullover hoodies, quarter zip, things like that. So go check them out today, and you can use that promo code Variety Sports in all caps. Thanks to the Variety Sports Network to receive 15% off that first order. I mean, it's hard to believe we're in week 10 of college football already. Arkansas is sitting at 5-3 and just this close to being bowl eligible. One more game, and I think that's a big move on, going into the season. A lot of people thought maybe that wasn't something that was going to be possible, and it's looking like it's a very real possibility here with, 4 games left in the season, and, you just need one. You need one, and then maybe you can get another one. Win 2 of the last 4, sitting at 7 wins. I think that would be a successful season in terms of what the kind of projections or kind of what the thoughts were before the season got started.
Yeah, and I'll be the first to say, I mean, you can go back and watch some of our episodes from way on back. I had us pick to go 5-7 and miss a bowl game. That was kind of my preliminary thoughts. Obviously, we stole a game against Tennessee. Nobody had us pick to win that game. Let's be real. I mean, even I don't care if you're a diehard fan, you kind of still had that one marked as a loss, probably. So that was a stolen one right there, which is good. But I think the thing that's been a little bit of a surprise, even though some of us expected us to play good in games, I think we've shown some improvement week in and week out. Some of it's been incremental. Some of it's been, big steps here and there. Like I felt like we saw a pretty big step improvement now that we got Patrick Kudus back on the offensive line last week. Granted, you're playing Mississippi State, but that looked to me like a very big step forward for this offensive line. And Talon had big success off of it. But throughout the course of the season, I feel like we've done a pretty good job of fixing some of the mistakes that cost us some early games, like Oklahoma State, Texas A&M, those two especially. We're not turning the ball over as much. The LSU game, we had a couple fluky ones, and it hurt us that game for real. That's a really good team, though. But I feel like we've made less of those critical mistakes. We still had a couple of those funky illegal formations, 2 guys moving at the same time, and illegal motion type penalties that still are kind of lingering around and hurting us, and a couple false start type things like that. But it doesn't seem like they're to the same magnitude as they were early on in the year outside the UAPB game. That was we're not even talking about that one. But so all in all, I feel like the season's been a success already. I really think we're going to win one more. Most likely the Louisiana Tech game. But to your point, I think there's a legitimate shot for us to steal another game, or I'm not even really going to say steal because I feel like we match up fairly well with Ole Miss. I think they're not as good as they thought. I think we're better than a lot of people thought. So it's a more even matchup than initially anticipated if you think back to how we thought about it at the start of the year. And then Missouri is another one that's kind of on that same page, if we're being honest. They're not as good as they thought they were at the beginning of the year, and maybe we're a little bit better than they thought we were, for example. So those 2 games I think are maybe not 50-50s, but pretty close in my mind, where if you play well, similar to how you did against Mississippi State, similar to how you did against Tennessee, where you limit the turnovers, limit the mistakes, and your defense does their thing, forces a couple turnovers. Landon Jackson has been really, really good the last couple of games. If he keeps that kind of play up, the rest of the D-line thrives due to that. And we got a shot to win 7, maybe 8 games regular season. I think 7 is a pretty decent guess. If we can win one of the 2 between Ole Miss and Missouri, and then do what we're supposed to do against Louisiana Tech, that would get you to 7 wins. And I think, I'm not going to lie, that's way outside of the realm of what I thought was possible. That was like the ceiling in my mind, and that was making a bowl game and then winning the bowl game to get your 7th win, essentially, was kind of the ceiling I had in my head, just looking at the schedule to start the year. So if that was possible, and then we can win our bowl game potentially to get 8 wins on this year, I think that is a tremendous success. But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit on how this season can go, because there's going to be a lot of things that got to be done correctly, and then injuries are going to play a key piece with some stuff we'll cover later on in the segment, with some of the guys that are going to be out in this Ole Miss game.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things that, it's very clear. Even Pittman's mentioned it this year in press conferences, things like that, it's almost a given that, week in, week out, the team that wins the turnover battle is most likely going to win the game. But it seems like that's almost intensified this year for some odd reason. You have every now and then teams that, they may not win the turnover margin, but still find some, way to win games. This year, it seems
4th downs or something like that, the stuff that doesn't necessarily show up on the stat sheet as a turnover per se.
Right. And it seems like this year's been almost like cut and dry. Like if you lose that turnover margin, you're losing the game. It doesn't matter. So I think that's clear cut for Arkansas. You've seen the games that we win, the games that we lost. It's clearly we play much cleaner games than the games we win. So, I mean, if you're looking at one thing going into every game plan to play a clean game. And that's hard to game plan necessarily because funky things happen, like we talked about LSU. You can't predict a guy batting a ball up and then somehow tipping it to himself and catching it at the 1, things like that. So I think that's one thing that's going to be key the rest of the way out, especially the way we've continued to look better, is if we can keep on, the path of clean games. Because, I mean, that's what we've had. And even if you look at the Mississippi State game, we had a couple turnovers, but we won that turnover margin like 5 or 6 to 1 or 2. Taylor had one tip pass that got picked off. But, I mean, when you look at it, that's what it comes down to. Tennessee, no turnovers. UAPB, like that's it. We're not going to talk about that game because that was a give-me game. UAB and Auburn especially, that was a back and forth, gross, just ugly game that they had more turnovers than we did. So I think
let's be real though. I think Auburn, that's sorry to interrupt you there, but I think Auburn is a game that if we played them right now, that game would look a lot more like how Mississippi State did. I think, we'd hang 58 points. The margin would be way bigger than it was, even though we got the win in that game. But like, I think we would have capitalized more. Our offense is better now. Guys are healthier outside of like Jaquindon Jackson, for example. But if we played them right now, I think it would be even worse. I think we've improved. I think they've regressed even more. They've had some spurts here and there, but they're still having issues, man. I think our defense would have given them fits no matter when we played them in the year. You know what I mean? But anyway, it's a side point there.
Yeah. And so as we continue to start looking forward to this week, after week 9, a few stats for the SEC as a whole. Jaquindon Jackson is still 3rd in rushing touchdowns with 10, and he's missed a game. He is still 5th. He is 5th in rushing yards with 592 on the season. So, he's still right up there in the top 5, even with missing out on a game. You have Taylor Green 8th in passing touchdowns with 11. You have Andrew Armstrong 2nd in the SEC in receiving yards with 722. And then you also have Taylor 3rd in SEC passing yards behind, I'm sure you can guess, Jackson Dart, Garrett Nussmeier, with 2,056 passing yards on the season. So these guys are, they're continuing to elevate their performance, and it's reflecting on, these numbers here as far as conference-wise.
100%. I mean, realistically, the offense has been pretty solid this year. It has 100% been the turnovers that have bit us when we've lost games, because the offense has been able to move the ball on literally everyone we've played, outside of LSU a little bit, but even that one we moved the ball better than it looked like on the scoreboard. And so I think Petrino really has done a good job on getting this team as ready as possible. It's been the mental mistakes on the field, not necessarily the coaching scheme or anything like that, that's hurt us. And so those things are correctable. And I think the experience that everybody's gaining playing together, you're starting to see some of that trust in each other, where Talon's not forcing to throw as much, or he's not, making that one read and trying to force it into his number one guy, Andrew Armstrong, or something like that. He's making better reads. He's having more time to make better reads. Or when he gets out and he's running, he's healthier now than he was in the LSU game. So he had some tremendous plays against Mississippi State to just go ahead and take off. So I think the culmination of kind of all the games that have happened thus far have helped Talon grow a ton. I feel like Talon right now is a way different quarterback than Talon Green of Oklahoma State, Texas A&M, Auburn, those games early on. He was still good in some of those games, don't get me wrong, but you've really seen a tremendous uptick in his completion percentage. And I think a lot of that is just due to he's not second-guessing throws or anything like that, or trying to guide the ball in there. He's just seeing what's there and slinging that thing, trusting himself, trusting the guys around him to make the plays. And it's resulting in tremendous highlight level plays on some throws, but then just taking what the defense gives you on a lot of it and hitting those passes accurately. He's gained a lot of momentum in that regard. I know a lot of people talked early in the season that, you can't really improve some of your accuracy overnight. You might want to eat some words, because I think Talon really has. Truly, you look at the Mississippi State game, I felt like he was accurate in pretty much all phases of his passing game, whether it was short throws, some of the screen passes, some of the deep balls, and some of those kind of intermediate post-type routes and stuff. You think of that Jordan Anthony touchdown. That's a pro-level throw, 100% pro-level throw. And then when you have Luke Haas squeaking out on that kind of 4th and 1, the Ryan Mallett-esque look behind the back.
The old cowboy go get him play.
We saw a play very similar to that a couple games ago. I can't remember who it was against, and he threw it at the guy's feet, hit the ground. I believe it was Jordan Anthony, actually, that was squeaking open in the flat off of a very similar play design, and he just straight up missed it because he was thinking too hard about the throw. I can't overthrow him, so he ended up underthrowing him.
Remember overtime against Oklahoma State, he did that as well. Rodney Hill was squeaking out in the flat.
Same thing, and just hit him in the feet. And so I think he's trusting himself, trusting his guys. He's not overthinking things as much, and that's just because of familiarity and comfort back there in the pocket or on the run. He's very good on the run. And so you've seen a really good trajectory of his accuracy over the last couple of weeks. And that's what all of us hoped. The more chemistry these guys get as they play together, iron sharpens iron. You're playing a bunch of really good opponents. You're getting better because of it. And I think this is exactly the Talon Green that we were hoping we would get. Took a couple of weeks to get there, you know what I'm saying? But I think everybody understood that was going to be the most likely outcome. And, with a transfer, with a whole lot of new things to learn, a whole lot of new guys to play with, a whole new offensive line, just a whole lot of new things, it was going to take a minute before everything kind of gelled together. And I still don't think we're all the way where we're going to get to. But I feel like we've seen a really good momentum throughout this year, and I'm really hoping that ends up with 1 or 2 more wins on the season outside of just the Louisiana Tech game to really, finish strong, provide some momentum into the recruiting side of things for next year. You're going to get a lot of these guys back. Hopefully Talon is one of them. I think you get several guys back on the offensive line, a lot of your receivers, half of your receivers, a couple of your tight ends. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But anyways, I think there's potential for next year to build on this year, especially considering we have a chance to really capitalize on this momentum at the end of the year.
Yeah, you've got a lot of high-level recruits on the defensive side of the ball, too, for next season coming in. But I don't want to spend a ton on last week, but it's like you said, I think we've seen that improvement and that gelling together, and it showed. We'll run through some Week 9 awards here real quick. Talon Green was graded the highest quarterback in Week 9 by PFF, which is Pro Football, on the last F. I think it's Pro Football Focus, maybe. Was graded in 94, the highest quarterback in Week 9. You have him named the Walter Camp National Player of the Week. He was named the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Player of the Week honorable mention. He was a Davy O'Brien Award Grade 8 nominee. He was a Week 9 Manning Award Star of the Week. He was Co-Offensive Player of the Week. So sticking with those co's is something about, like, if you're from Arkansas, we got to slap you with a co. But, I mean, he's getting recognized for his performance. Yes, it was Mississippi State, but he still come out and executed like he was supposed to, compared to, like, you would have thought this was the type of game we should have had against a UAB, a game like this. But now he's doing what he's supposed to against these not as upper echelon teams. And then you also have Luke Haas graded as the highest tied in by PFF at an 89.6, 2 touchdowns on the day for him, finally getting him involved in the game. I know ourselves here, plus a lot of fans, have been wanting to see him get involved, and finally, I think the offensive line playing better plays into that. And then you have Braylon Russell getting his first start, getting named co-freshman of the week as well. He looked great on Saturday, getting his first kind of nod to be the starting guy. You saw Debinion, I believe the carries were 16 to 11. Russell had 16. You had Debinion with 11. So he was the main guy on Saturday, and you saw him kind of take that and run with it. It was a funny story Pittman told in the press conference where he was like, he told Braylon Russell before the game, he was like, don't go out here and make me look like a fool for, starting you here. And he said Braylon Russell came up to him after the game in the locker room, was like, Coach, I bet I didn't make you look like a fool, did I now? So you love that joking and back and forth between him and Coach Pittman. But, we know he's a talented kid. And, if Pittman stays, we kind of talked about that a little bit. If Pittman stays, this could be one of the next Arkansas greats as far as you think about home state kids that stays home, and it could be one of, we're talking about one of the top players from Arkansas years down the road if he stays and kind of lives up to the potential and the hype that's there for him. So.
Yeah, it was a fun game to watch for him for sure. I know he was excited to play as well as he did. The offensive line was creating monster holes for him, but even when they weren't, he was making the right reads, the right cuts, he was getting upfield at the right times, squeaking through holes that a guy that big shouldn't fit through. He's a lot more elusive than you'd think for a guy that's 253 pounds, and then he can lay a lick on somebody too.
I was about to say, it's not that hard or not that easy to stop somebody coming through the line that's 6'1", 253. Those linebackers, it's hard to stack up against that.
Yeah, you're not wrong. So it's fun to watch him play out there. I think he's not quite as fast on the top end speed as a Jaquindon, for example. But you got to give Rashad Dubinion his flowers in this game as well. He was close to 100 yards. I think he was around 90 on the day, somewhere around in that neck of the woods. Yeah. And, we were very close to having 2 100-yard rushers in the same game, and it's been a hot minute since we've had that, probably back to the Alex Collins,
Jonathan
Williams days, I would imagine. There might have been some sneaky ones in there. Well, if you count quarterbacks, that's different, but 2 100-yard rushing running backs alone, it's probably been since AC and Jay Will were back there. But anyhow, both of these guys really did the most with their carries. But you'd have to, give the offensive line a ton of credit for that. They did a great job, absolutely manhandling the line of scrimmage almost the entire game. There wasn't a lot of run plays where we were losing yardage or that we were getting hit in the backfield during the transfer or something like that. We've seen our team fumble a couple of times due to the offensive line missing an assignment, and then Talon doesn't even have enough time to hand the ball off without they're both getting hit, and then boom, the ball's on the ground. So they've done a really good job cleaning up some of those type of plays and understanding, where these blitzes are coming from, trying to be the most run ready for those position groups, whether it's a disguised blitz, they're recognizing that more often. I think a lot of that's just coming with these guys playing together week in and week out, getting that chemistry with each other. They're communicating at the line better, all those things. And that's exactly what you expect to happen, at this point in the year. You've come a long way. You've learned a lot along the way, and the guys are utilizing it to play better week in and week out against these opponents. And they really capitalized in this game against a weaker opponent, if you will, and did exactly what they're supposed to do. But, yeah, I thought the team as a whole really deserved a lot of credit.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder, was Patrick Kuda's kind of a key that kind of unlocked this offense, if you will, or this offensive line. This was easily the best game they had all season. And, if they can continue to play like this, Patrick Kudas is getting ramped up. I know he split some time, I believe, with Keyshawn Blackstock on Saturday, but I mean, could him coming back, have been part of the improvement for this offensive line as well? It makes you wonder a little bit how big of it was that him being out and missing a lot of time affected this group, because I'm sure he was probably one of the guys that was slated in to be a starter, throughout fall camp or summer camp and in the spring and stuff. And then he comes up and gets hurt with a back issue for half the season so far. And, Pittman already established that they're going to redshirt him. So out of the next 4 games, he can play in 3 of them. So, and Pittman said he's definitely playing this weekend. So you can probably figure I would assume he's not going to play Louisiana Tech, and keep him for the other 2 SEC games. But
that's what I would think too. So, but that's a nice problem to have. I don't know if you really want to say it that way, but it's kind of cool to pick up somebody on the second half of the season instead of the other way around, what we're used to, where we're running our depleted line out there with 3 guys that are out for the season at this point, and that's always tough. So anyways, it's kind of nice to be on the opposite side of that. But I don't know how much we want to read into him coming back was the key. I think it helped things. Don't get me wrong. He provides a lot of senior leadership out there, if you will. And that helps. But I think you do have to think a lot of it is just the opponent you were playing. Historically been a bad offense or bad defense all year long. We did what we were supposed to against them, don't get me wrong. And to your point earlier, we didn't do what we were supposed to against a team like UAB, for example. So to actually come in and play how you're supposed to, how you're expected to, capitalize on the turnovers and things like that when you're supposed to, that was all good things that you can really build off of and continue that type of success.
exactly. And, Will Pig here's got a great point. What's been the issue with this secondary? I mean, it's insane. Coming into the season, we thought it was going to be much improved. And I think part of it you got to look at is you haven't had Jalen Braxton since the Oklahoma State game. That's going to be a key piece, because he was one of those guys that was expected to be one of the key pieces in that secondary. And then you got to think they've been shorthanded a little bit. They didn't get Miguel Mitchell, a transfer from Florida, that was probably expected to play some depth or be a depth piece. That he wasn't available until LSU, and then so you're having to run guys a little bit more, and you have some younger guys that are developing a little bit. Like you've seen a major development in the Metcalf boys. I mean, you think about the Auburn game was kind of their kind of like breakout type of game, almost like the Hudson Clark game 4 years ago against Ole Miss, was where they had several picks. So you got to kind of think it was a combination of developing some of these young guys and maybe being a little short-handed compared to what we maybe thought with Jalen Braxton going down. And so, hopefully T. Will's got a good game plan for this weekend to kind of Ole Miss has seen the tape against what LSU did. So to kind of be prepared for that, maybe not play soft coverage, kind of be able to be a little bit more aggressive and be willing to, hey, if they burn us on a shot or something deep, they do, and we'll move past it, compared to don't let them dink and dunk down the field. And this is a good point here too. Cuddy Robinson got off to a great start, but kind of mellowed out the last few games. I think he's the transfer that came in from South Alabama. And here recently has had a lot of problems with pass interference calls going against him. I can at least think of at least 2 in the Mississippi State game where, I mean, he's just being a little bit too handsy and grabbing guys, and you can't do that. And it's kind of like guys up and down seasons as well. You got to think Danico Slaughter didn't have a great game against UAB, bounced back against Auburn, and things like that. So guys are kind of getting into midseason form, but you've got to wonder, this secondary's almost done the opposite of that.
Yeah, it's kind of how it feels. Obviously I think competition level has been a piece of it. And then maybe some of it is just film. People understand how to beat us and where our weaknesses are a little bit more now than maybe they did early on in the season. Some of the guys to throw it, some of the guys to not throw it. I really don't know. That may be getting a little too far in the weeds. I'm not sure if it's that degree. But to your point, the consistency level has been weird. You've had some really good standout highlight plays here and there, even in the secondary where guys were, glued to their man, or they were playing really disciplined zone or whatever the case may be, finding ways to get key stops on, those 3rd and 5 type pass plays and stuff like that. But then on the flip side of that, we're giving up these 10-yard curl routes and stuff. We're not pressing when we should over and over and over. And part of that, I think, is a coaching thing where we need to be a little bit more adjust on the fly, if that makes sense. Don't know all the ins and outs on how much we trust some of these guys on the back end. I know a lot of our defensive mantra right now, being a little bit depleted, is just bend but don't break. And we've done a fairly good job of that. We're giving up yards, but we're not giving up just a ton of points. Some of that's been luck related. Some of that's been just due to us, having goal line, 4th down stops and things like that. And that is kudos to the defense and good coverage and stuff. But then on the second side of it too, though, it's not always on the secondary where we've given up a play here, a play there. Sometimes you don't get enough pressure to force the ball out fast enough. And if a quarterback has, more than a second and a half to 2 seconds, realistically, that's quite a bit of time in the pocket. And especially if they're able to get out of the pocket and break contain, then all bets are off in your second. You can't ask those guys to cover a 5-second type scramble drill. You're not going to cover that in the SEC. Most of the time, our corners aren't going to be faster than receivers. It's impossible to follow exactly where they're going. Those guys know where they're going, and you're trying to follow them, kind of thing. And so those types of plays where we've kind of had some containment break and things of that nature, that's not on the secondary. It looks like it's on the secondary, but it's not, if that makes sense. So I think there's some things that get a little bit skewed here and there on what's actually their fault and what's not their fault, if that makes sense. So you got to take a little bit of that with a grain of salt. I think this secondary is better than they have let on the last couple of weeks. There's just been some inconsistencies in pressure. There's been a couple of inconsistencies in mismatch coverages and things like that where we probably didn't scheme as well against a certain player as we should have or something of that nature. But overall, though, I don't think this unit has been bad. I think they've just kind of gotten gashed on some plays here and there where we've let a quarterback break contain or there's been too long in the pocket, things of that nature. So got to do a little bit better job. That's a good point there by Woo Pig. Front forward's got to play a little bit more disciplined and not let these guys – you can't over pursue and let these guys squeak up into the pocket or break contain on the edges and things of that nature. You got to get that pressure there, but don't over pursue to the point that now you're out of the play. That's been a problem here and there, and there's been some big completions happening against us due to that. Garrett Nussmeier crushed us with plays like that. So, anyways, that to me, that's kind of the bigger issue is the cohesiveness of the defense as a whole. When one piece breaks down, it puts too much pressure on the other side of the defense, if you will, and so now you're having to really struggle to get a stop on that play. So just discipline on all facets on the defense is what's really going to be how you beat Ole Miss. But I think the secondary gets picked on more than they probably should. However, we have had inconsistent play from certain players where they have a great week and followed up with not knowing a dang assignment out there, it seems like.
Yeah, and we'll dive a little bit more in this matchup here in a little bit during our preview. We'll highlight a couple other things. We jump down. Basketball season's right here. First official game is next week. You got another exhibition game coming up this weekend on the road at TCU and Dickies Arena down in Fort Worth. Unfortunately, no televised network coverage for this one, just radio. Listen to Chuck and Coach Z call this game. So, should be another great test. You saw Coach Jen meet with the media today and kind of talk about they're excited. It'll give them a kind of a practice run of how they're going to handle going down to Dallas and all their pregame and things like that when they play Baylor in a few weeks in the season. So it'll be kind of a great another tune-up game for this team. Can't wait to see what happens here. It's going to be another game, and I'm excited to see what Boogie Flan and DJ Wagner and some of those guys do this week, can they kind of build on that performance from last week and continue to impress in their first seasons as Razorbacks under Coach Cal? And, you got to talk basketball. You got to look at what's going on as far as recruiting wise. It came out yesterday. Arkansas is in the top 4 for in-state. Arkansas Springdale native Isaiah Seeley, he is in the top 4 for the 6'7" small forward, who is a top 75 recruit in the 2025 class. He's down to us, Ole Miss, Cal, and Boston College. Some of those other schools surprise me a little bit as they're not necessarily basketball schools. So hoping Coach Cal can work his magic, get the home state kids stay home, and come play for the Razorbacks in what is expected to be one heck of a recruiting class loaded with, the typical Coach Cal recruiting class loaded with 5 4-star guys. We've already got Darius Acuff. It looks like Malik Thomas is set on being a Razorback. There's a few other guys that have visited that, we're hearing different things on it, or crystal balls and things like that. So, last week's performance definitely helps with that when you have, even though they were, not 100% number one Kansas, but you have number one Kansas come into your building and have such a great crowd for just an exhibition game. These recruits see that and they're like, man, that's a place I want to go play. Not to mention we have a nice hefty pocket of NIL as well.
That's probably the biggest piece, honestly, in this day and age. I think fan environment, the potential to get to the NBA, all those things are huge. But then if you're able to make a decent chunk while you're in college developing for the NBA, for example, that's kind of a win-win situation. I think Arkansas has put ourselves in a really good position to compete for all these recruits just due to that alone. So I think you've got a good pipeline to get to the NBA here. The fans' perspective, you're going to be playing in front of packed houses all the time in one of the better conferences in basketball. And then you might make a pretty good check while you're here doing all that and having a great time on campus. So what's not to love about our basketball situation right now? So I'm excited about it, man. I think it's going to be a fun year this year. And then I think next year has potential to be even crazier. We'll see.
Exactly. I mean, if you're a guy coming in here, like we said, with that NIL opportunities, but also to who doesn't want to play for Coach Cal? The number of guys he's gotten to the league, even before Coach Cal got here, just as far as looking at Arkansas as a whole, Eric Musselman was doing a great job of getting guys funneled into the league his last couple of seasons here. You got to look at, you think Anthony Black from last season or 2 seasons ago, Nick Smith, Jordan Walsh, 3 McDonald's All-Americans that were one-and-dones here. You got to think Moses Moody, that he got one of his first years here.
Jay Will's in the league, been doing great things.
Jay Will, exactly. I mean, you got to think it's almost –
heck, Isaiah Joe's in the league too, man.
Yeah. I mean, you look at what's done.
Arkansas boys.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at it too. Coach Musk came in and kind of took us to another level after you look at Mike Anderson, got us back to a solid, I guess, foundation of a program, if you will, after the bad Pelfrey days. Mike Anderson comes in, gets us to a decent spot, but can never really get to that next level, get all over that hump. In comes Eric Musselman, a guy, ton of NBA experience, comes in, makes the tournament, takes us to several Elite Eights, Sweet 16s. Unfortunately, he departs, but I mean, a blessing in disguise there is you get one of the best coaches that's been around and done it with Coach Cal, all thanks to some relationships with some business owners here, CEOs here in Northwest Arkansas that kind of that relationship helped a lot. And hopefully, I think it's not surprising to say it could be national championship or bust with Coach Cal here in the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure, but I think that's the expectation, and especially with some of the echelon of players that he's able to bring in. Yeah, I mean, it's just that next little incremental step above Eric Musselman, I think, and I'm hoping that just from what we saw in the Kansas game, and I know there was some caveats there because Kansas didn't run like a lot of zone because we asked him not to run a lot of zone and stuff like that. So I'm curious to see, how we play in season against teams that are truly trying to beat us for their record and playing whatever they, can to mitigate our offensive abilities. That said, though, we actually looked like a cohesive basketball team, running plays, running defensive sets. I mean, and a lot of it was keeping it simple, but it was working. And sometimes keeping it simple is the best thing to do, especially when you got guys that are freakazoid athletes that make keeping it simple look like highlight plays. So I think this team got a lot of potential to surprise some folks early on. Even though we're expected to be good, I think we have potential to be better than expected. On the flip side of that, with it being such a fresh and raw team, there might be some potential to lose a couple of games and look worse than expected with some of the growing pains that are going along. So I think there's going to be a little bit of that roller coaster ride effect that happens this year. But I think that's going to be some of the growing pains that need to happen. We don't need to come out and look invincible from day one because then you get complacent and then end up losing round one of the tournament or something crazy. But overall, I think this has the makings to be a good team and maybe an even better team than we've ever had, like in the Musselman era or close at least. I know that Anthony Black, Nick Smith, Jordan Walsh team was like really, really talented and good. Didn't all quite come together, but it still was a really good team. This team under Coach Cal in year one is right there with that, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's the big what ifs. If as far as that team, what if Nick Smith would have been healthy all year?
Yeah, who knows, man.
Can't waste it on what ifs.
Nope.
But again, that's Friday. Taking on TCU. Tune in to Chuck and Z as they have the radio call for that. And then season's here next Wednesday. Lipscomb in Bud Walton. Should be a good time to get the season kicked off for the games that actually matter. As we continue on here, Arkansas soccer, they finished up regular season play. They had
Texas A&M, I believe
Texas
it was.
A&M come to town last week, ended in a draw, no scores. Arkansas had a goal called back off of a penalty, which was questionable to me. So, that factors into the record, our second draw of the season. And then Arkansas heads on the road for the regular season finale as they beat Ole Miss 5-0, where the Hawks picked up their 10th shutout of the season. And two players, Ava Tankersley and Kate Doyle, also netted braces in this game. Arkansas ended the first half 17-2 in shots. Tankersley had her fourth brace of the season after scoring 2 goals in the span of 4 minutes with feeds off from Doyle and Ansley Erzin. You had Doyle follow that up 4 minutes later in the 60th minute to put the match away for Arkansas. The defense gave up one chance on a frame that was saved by defender Avery Wren at the goal line. Arkansas finished this match a total in shots 23-3 against Ole Miss.
Wow.
And forced the goalkeeper to make 7 saves on the day on top of the 5 goals that already went in. So Doyle and Tankersley lead the team with 11 goals each. Tankersley moved up to number 2 on the program's all-time goals list with 38 and 110 points. Freshman goalkeeper Keegan Smith continued the regular season with 8 total shutouts, solo shutouts for her, and currently ranks 4th in the SEC. And Arkansas outscored its SEC opponents this season 28-6 on the year for the entire SEC play, with just one loss. One loss coming to Mississippi State and one draw coming to Texas A&M on the season. So they finished up conference play, and the SEC tournament down in Pensacola will be kicking off this next week. We're still waiting to find out what our seeding is going to be. I think we're probably going to be the number 2 seed in the SEC just because Mississippi State had an overall better record, even though we have one loss. They have the head-to-head against us in that win. So they'll probably take that number 1 seed in the SEC. Arkansas will probably come in at number 2. And we'll see what we do for the SEC tournament. Is it going to be another one of those years where we can make it to the final game and finally get the win? Or is it another, we make it to the final, the championship game and don't get the win, whatever happens is fine. I'm looking towards that NCAA tournament more than just the SEC tournament.
I feel like third time's the charm, because I think it's been back-to-back years where we've made it to that championship game and lost, or the conference championship game and lost. So maybe third time's the charm, and we can finally bring some hardware home from there. But to your point, we definitely are all kind of eyes on the NCAA tournament once that comes around. So this team's been good all year long. I've never seen a drop off. There's not been any type of fall off. You've had a couple games where I haven't looked as good here and there, but not significantly. Overall, this team is probably set up better than we've been even over the last couple of years to make a deeper run than we have. So I keep taking cracks at it, man. It's just like baseball. We're always there. We're always competitive. One of these days it's going to go our way. So hopefully it's sooner rather than later for this Arkansas soccer team, because a lot of these girls have been here a minute and put in a ton of work and are really, really good and deserve to bring home some hardware finally.
Yeah, I agree. You look at that. Most likely we will be playing on Tuesday, November the 5th at 11:30 versus the winner of the 7-10 seed, which according to, if we're going off the rankings here, would be the winner of Georgia and LSU, if I did my math right looking at our conference standings. So, like Seth said, hopefully we bring home that hardware and can get it done and then get ready for a big run in the NCAA tournament here coming up within the next month or so. As we jump over to Arkansas volleyball, they have been continuing to roll, and they're actually they're playing tonight. So let's see, yes, they are taking on Florida tonight kicked off, or the match started at 7:00. Previously, we had that loss to A&M last week. You come back home, unfortunately lose 3-1 to Missouri, and then follow that up with a road loss 3-0 at Mississippi State. So need a bounce back win tonight against Florida in Barnhill. Should be good there. It should be an exciting match. Softball's finished up fall ball. And season's right around the corner along with baseball. They're going to get it fired up, in just a few months' time. And lots of expectations there for those guys. It should be exciting. Quick question as we revert back to basketball really quick. Pigpen says, so did Jackson Robinson magically learn the game of basketball all of a sudden? Must never played him, but he seems to be balling out at Kentucky. That's an interesting thing to think about, because they even asked him at SEC Media Days about Muss, and he was like, no comment on that. I don't really want to talk about that. So, it kind of tells me maybe him and Muss butted heads a little bit on, something or whatever it was. But, I mean,
I think the timing was just bad on that, man. He was a freshman. I think,
he was balling at BYU last year. If you remember him last year, at one point he was leading the entire NCAA in 3-point percentage.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up. Like, I think it was just a bad timing situation when he was here with Muss his freshman year. Didn't play a lot. Really didn't play well when he was on the court, though, that much. Took some forced shots, was a little bit of a liability on defense, and we all know that if you're a liability on defense, Muss isn't going to play you a ton. So that was part of the issues there, and I don't think he had truly found his footing in college basketball at the time. A lot of guys don't. It takes them kind of to get to that sophomore year. They put on some muscle. They have a lot more time to work in the gym than they did in high school, for example, and come a long way in development. I think that's 100% what's kind of happened for Robinson. And he said a little bit that he didn't really develop a whole bunch under Musselman. Fair enough. Don't know if that was a priority for Musselman at the time. Yeah, that's kind of the thing. And so props to him. Everybody knew he was going to be a good player. It just didn't happen his freshman year. And the timing of everything didn't necessarily work out for him to stick around and develop at Arkansas with some of the way Musselman was trying to utilize the transfer portal and get different guys. It was just kind of a fluky thing. if the timing had been a little bit different, I feel like he was a player that would have stuck it out at Arkansas, and we could have seen that development of him actually happen here. But you can what if yourself to death, but I think he's always been a good player. He's just now learning the college game better, and it's showing in his game lately.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, like you said, it didn't happen here, but hopefully he has a good season at Kentucky other than when they play Arkansas. I mean, yeah, wish the kid luck there. So it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be a fun basketball season overall.
A lot of crazy storylines are going to happen this year with all the movement that goes on between coaches and players. And now these coaches are playing their old teams while players are also playing their old teams. It's just going to be insane. Kentucky especially. It's going to be wild.
Exactly. As we get ready to jump over to our Arkansas Ole Miss preview, before we do, don't forget to check out Scarlet Letter, Arkansas's very own handcrafted seltzer made right here and locally in Northwest Arkansas. Core Tap Room. You can go check them out if you're in Northwest Arkansas. Try them out. They're coming out with some new innovative things. They just dropped their new vodka soda a few months ago, back in the summer. And then Jared's Kicking Sauce, the sauce that's good on everything. Go check it out. He is growing that business fantastically. But hey, that's what happens when you have good product. Try it. Seth and I can attest to it. You can put almost anything and it's going to taste good. But Arkansas has a big week and a big chance to make some more noise this week as they take on Ole Miss. This has the chance to be a big one. I mean, it's like we stole that one against Tennessee, and I feel like this one could be that in a similar type of boat as that, as in, their season's not necessarily going how they thought it would have been. That loss to Kentucky is really hurting them. They've struggled the first half against Oklahoma last week. Oklahoma put up 14 points, and it wasn't a blowout either. 26-14 was the final score. You beat an Oklahoma team that's rightfully so been bad this year by 12 points when, other games they've blown out teams and things like that. Arkansas comes in as of today, a +6 underdog in this one. That's kind of shrunk a little bit from, Sunday when lines are first released from about 7.5. I wouldn't be surprised to see this get close to maybe 4 by Saturday, drop a couple more points. But coming in, I mean, this is going to be, I feel like there's going to be no in between. This is going to be a super high scoring game, or it's going to be one of those slobber knocker, low scoring game where a team that can score maybe 1 or 2 touchdowns wins the game. It's going to be, I think, another exciting one.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how my gut even feels about this game. If it's going to be an offensive showcase type game, kind of similar to how we were against Mississippi State, or if both defenses are going to play a little bit better against each other. I don't know. This one kind of feels like a wild card type game to me, where I think on paper we match up with them pretty well, but it really depends on what Ole Miss team shows up. And frankly, it kind of depends on which Arkansas team shows up. Is it the team that turns the ball over quite a bit, plays a little sloppily at the line and over pursues, and Jackson Dart's able to get a lot of yards with his legs? He's a sneaky runner, not horrible at running the ball. Obviously he wants to throw the ball more often than not, but if you leave him lanes open, he's going to gash you on the ground. So we're going to have to play really, really disciplined. Probably more so than we have all year. I think this offense has potential to be probably one of the better offensive teams we'll play all year long. LSU's up there. Obviously, we've kind of talked about the 2 quarterbacks that are leading the SEC in yardage, Garrett Nussmeier and Jackson Dart. So I think one of the bigger questions, though, is Trey Harris, if he plays or not. Right now, he's listed as questionable. I think that's a big asterisk on this game on how I feel, frankly, because in my opinion, we don't have anybody in our secondary that can really cover Trey Harris. Even if you're scheming zones around him and stuff like that, I just don't trust us to cover Trey Harris and keep him from having, a 100-yard game or more. He's just too good of a receiver. And Jackson Dart's too good of a quarterback to miss him and things of that nature when he is open. So that's going to be a big piece in my mind on how confident I feel about this game for us. That said, even if they do score points, I also think Arkansas has the ability to score points on this Ole Miss team. So, especially if we get the Taylor Green that we saw last week, the one that's healthy, that's running everywhere when he needs to, but is able to throw the ball. And you don't know how to play him because he can burn you with his arm, he can burn you with his legs, or he can hand it off to one of the many running backs that can burn you on the ground behind this offensive line that's trending in the right direction. So, if we can emulate kind of what Oklahoma did on defense well enough, but then play to our strengths on the offensive side of the ball and limit the possessions that Ole Miss has, kind of how we did against Tennessee, where we're taking some big chunk drives, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-minute drives potentially, stuff like that. That is really going to play into our strengths and keep Ole Miss from playing to their strengths, where they want to go fast, have a ton of possessions, put up a ton of points, things like that, really getting their rhythm just due to play volume. I think there's a really good avenue for us to win this game, and it fits how we like to play. How you can beat them fits how we like to play. So I think this is a game that Arkansas really does have a good shot at winning. Talent-wise, Ole Miss is very good and also has a good shot at winning this game. So I don't know how to pick it, frankly. It's truly going to come down to who shows up. We talk about it week in, week out. That turnover margin is going to be big in a game like this, where I don't think the margins are big at all, or the margins are tight, if that makes sense, on all the other factors. So if you can steal a possession, whether it being a fourth down stop, muffed punt, fumbles, picks, whatever it is, Landon Jackson absolutely tearing the game apart, making Jackson Dart have a couple strip sacks. I don't care. Those are the types of plays that I think are going to really put a stamp on this game for either team, whoever is able to make those impact type plays. I think it's going to be more so on the defensive side of the ball than it is the offensive side of the ball. I think both teams are going to highlight big offensive plays all game long. I know Ole Miss is going through here and there. Our defense isn't quite good enough to prevent all the big plays, and I truly don't think theirs is against us either. I think we're going to have some big plays against them. So whose defense can step up and make a big play on that side of the ball, I think is going to be a critical piece. Still, like I said, don't know how to pick it at all. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah. Quick shout out. Touch Talk with Ty in the building. Thanks for joining us.
Man?
Jumping in. Glad to see you here. But yeah, like Seth said, I think this is going to be a game. And one thing that's weird that you got might take into effect, it's not necessarily an absolute, but you look at the past 4 matchups, the home teams won every one of the last 4 matchups. If you think back to the first one, yeah, you think back to 2020 COVID year, that's the Hudson Clark 3 picks game here in Fayetteville and Arkansas, and Sam Pittman gets his first SEC win. The following year at Ole Miss, when Pittman makes the call to go for 2 with at the goal line. So, I mean, and we know how that one goes. He didn't want to try to force the overtime because he knew his guys were tired and burned out, so he just wanted to try to go for the win. And, following year, we bounced back. That's the game Rocket Sanders just ran all over this Ole Miss team. I believe you were at that game. I was out of town, but you were at that game.
It was a blast. Such a good game.
And then, we know how last year's game went. It was back and forth, a little bit closer matchup. Where Arkansas came close in that one, but didn't get the job done. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see another one of these games where something weird, crazy happens. Like you said, maybe we can take some notes off of what Oklahoma did. But, it should be a big game. You look at Jackson Dart, like we talked about, sitting up there at the top 3 of SEC quarterbacks in passing yards. He's sitting with nearly 2,700 yards on the season, 2,695, 15 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So he's taking care of the ball. And, when it comes to, like you said, forcing mistakes, I don't think it's going to come from him throwing interceptions necessarily. I think it's going to come from, the point that Big Pen mentioned earlier. The D-line has to force mistakes. You mentioned it with Landon Jackson. You look at the A&M game. We didn't force him to make any mistakes. LSU didn't. But you look at the Tennessee game. We forced mistakes. We got pressure. Got some hits on Nico. I mean, you look at how Landon Jackson started the game last week. One of the first 2 plays of the game, he gets a strip sack and Arkansas takes over in their own or in plus territory for an easy, quick score by Taylor Green. And I think that's the type of play you're going to have. This team's going to have to come out, motivated, ready to go, and this D-line is going to have to get the pressure there to force like some of those strips type sacks or fumbles, from these running backs, whatever it may be. Because I don't think our secondaries that bend don't break, but I don't think they maybe surprise me, but I don't think they'll be able to pick off Jackson Dart with just how accurate and how good he is about taking care of the ball. He's putting it where only his guys are going to get it, or it's not going to be a completed pass. So I think it's going to be one of those things where we're going to have to force the mistakes up front, not deep in the secondary, and hopefully we can limit the plays that we get burned. Pigpen, this would be very interesting to see. Pay $10 to see Russell truck Pooh Paul. That is one of the many storylines coming into this game. You do have Pooh Paul returning after, I don't want to say just, tossing Arkansas to the side last year. Things were a little bit weird last year. I don't think it was necessarily anything in the coaching staff, but he said he didn't feel necessarily the same drive that he had with some of his teammates and things like that. Not going to get into a ton of that, but
I think if he'd have stuck around, he would have enjoyed this year's team. I can understand where he came from with, wanted to jump ship, I guess, with a little bit of the issues that were going on, just mentality and leadership wise in the locker room.
Man, him and Landon Jackson back this year
would have been huge, man. He's had a pretty good year for Ole Miss. Honestly, I think he would have had a really good year for us. He's a really good player. He's going to be good wherever he goes. I just hope that it's not this game that he, stands out and shines. I know he's going to want to, but I hope it's the exact opposite. But I really love that guy. I hated to see him go. I'm still a fan of his. Even though he's playing for the opposite team here, he's a great guy. I've enjoyed watching him play ball. One of the better linebackers that's come through in a while. We've had some really good ones come through over the last 10 years or so between Dre Greenlaw, Martrell Spade. That may be longer than 10 years. I'm missing a couple there. You had the transfer from Alabama. Drew Sanders was just a phenom. Yeah. And then a handful of other ones I'm forgetting all the names right now. There's one Grant between Morgan. Spate and Dre Greenlaw. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But Grant Morgan. Obviously, the Henry brother was not bad. Hayden, I believe. There's been some really, really solid ones go through. So I always loved watching Chris Paul play. Chris Paul, the basketball player, was always one of my favorite players growing up in basketball. So I just gravitated to liking the name, so that was cool to kind of root for that too. But anyway, I am with Pigpen here, though. I want to see us go right at him all game and make him make plays and see if we can kind of beat him and smash him around a little bit. And just if we can pull out the win, it would maybe rub a little salt in the wound, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, I hope nobody gets hurt on either team, at all. I got a lot of respect for Ole Miss. I don't necessarily love them. There's been some crazy games over the past couple of years that have left bad taste in both teams' mouth. Ole Miss hates Arkansas. There's been a lot of ugly games that we've won, 4th and 25, for example, that, that's still in everybody's mind, ours especially, but it's in their mind too, because they were well on their way to having a really good year that year until we kind of flubbed it up for them. So there's some bad blood between these two teams historically. And to me, this is probably, we've talked about rivalries in the past. This is actually probably one of Arkansas's best rivalries that's not even considered a rivalry. Just based off of the records between each other over the last, 10, 15 years or so, it's fairly even. There's usually fairly competitive games with a lot of craziness that goes on. People want to talk about A&M being a rival. I mean, fair, but they've whooped us more often than not over the last 12 years, which I hate to say. LSU's kind of similar. We've had a handful of wins over the past 10 or 12 years, but majority of them have been losses. This Ole Miss team, it kind of feels like a rivalry. And then when all the coaching stuff happened, people here were kind of wanting Lane Kiffin, some weren't, whatever. We don't go after Lane Kiffin. People thought we offered him, but we may not. I don't even know all the weeds. There was a lot of rumors going around during that time with both teams looking for coaches. And so there's just naturally been a ton of crap talk, if you will, between these teams ever since the hiring of these coaches. So over the last like 5-6 years, it's just been weird. And then you rewind it back to like, Brett being the coach, and I can't remember if I think it was Hugh Freeze. Yeah, I was going to say I think it was Hugh Freeze, and we know how everybody around here hates Hugh Freeze. So it's just
I was about to say, and then you rewind it back before that. You have Houston Nutt leave Arkansas to go to Ole Miss.
Ole Miss. So there's just a lot of history between these two teams. And I personally feel more of a rivalry with Ole Miss than I do almost everyone else in the SEC, just over the last 10 years or so with the way the games have gone. A lot of the jargon that goes on and crap talk on Twitter between both fan bases and stuff. I love this game due to it. So I've got a lot of high hopes that we can come out and play our best ball. And honestly, I hope Ole Miss plays good ball, but I want us to beat them. You know what I mean? I don't want to get some fluky game where Jackson Dart breaks his leg and throws 6 picks before it or something weird where you put an asterisk by the win. I truly want to get these guys best, and I want to beat them at their best, or at least close. If Trey Harris don't play, I'm not going to be mad about that, but we'll see how it goes. I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Circling back to Chris Paul, I mean, he is the guy for Ole Miss this year. He does lead that defense in tackle, or lead that defense total with 32 solo tackles on the season, 25 assisted tackles, 57 total in the season. He's had 2.5 sacks, 3 pass deflections. So he's kind of been one of the guys on that Ole Miss defense. But you can't forget, Wu Pig here's got a point. Landon Jackson's also started to get into a groove a little bit. So, I mean, it seems like he's getting hot at the right time. Hog fan said Pooh did an interview with Feinbaum today. He did. I haven't got a chance to watch it.
That'll be good to see. I'll have to look that up.
Paul and Sorey would have been a dangerous combo. Yes, they would have. That would have been insane. Forget about Jordan Crook that transferred out as well. Another young linebacker that could have been solid for us.
You can what if yourself to death, but I do like our team right now. I think we need to. If he would have stayed, it would have added some very, very much needed depth to that linebacking unit. Who's decent, but I don't think we have enough depth there. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Big Ben here said once Ole Miss started SEC play and their scoring went way down as well, not just ours. Guess that's what happens when you quit playing teams like UMass. That's true. That level of competition ramps up, and then you see what happens. Everybody's going to not be scoring 70 points a week and blowing teams out by 20, 30 points.
To me, though, they didn't do what they were supposed to do against Oklahoma. That Oklahoma game was supposed to look like our game against Mississippi State based off, kind of the conjecture around the week. I know Trey Harris not playing was a big point of emphasis, but still that team is loaded. And to only put up 26 points on that team that really just hasn't been good. Their defense is okay at best, but you get a ton of possessions because they have no offense. So you get the ball on a ton of 3 and outs or turnovers or whatever the case may be. I know Jackson Arnold played a little bit better for Oklahoma. Still nothing great, though. It wasn't anything to write home about.
I think that's part of the story you think about with Jackson Arnold, a guy that was their starter, got benched. Well, the guy that he got benched for started not looking so great either, so Jackson Arnold becomes the starter again and then scores 2 touchdowns against you. I mean, it kind of makes it a little suspect there, so.
Yeah, we'll see how things go, but I think there's potential for us to put up some points against this defense of Ole Miss. And then, maybe we can kind of continue the trend of the rest of the SEC opponents that's played them and slow their offense down enough to really have a good shot at winning this game.
Yeah, I agree. And you got to talk about injuries when you're talking about this game. Arkansas, the Wednesday reports already came out this week, and we know for sure Jalen Braxton's out. Pittman said that if he comes back this season, that it probably wouldn't be until the Texas game. He's going to be redshirted, which means he'll come back next year. Kyle Ramsey's out, of course. We know had that groin injury against Tennessee. Jaquindon Jackson, he's listed as out, highly doubtful, according to Pittman in his press conference from Monday and today. So probably another week of Braylon Russell and Rashad Dominion leading this team. And then Rodney Hill, probable. So if you get Rodney Hill back as well, that adds another back to that backfield that we can use and utilize, which would be nice. as far as Jackson, he did re-aggravate an ankle injury against LSU, missed entirely last week. He said that Jackson could be doubtful in this first report, but he is probably listed as out for this game, so you're probably not going to see Jackson. Rodney, who hasn't played since Texas A&M game, he was dealing with a knee injury, so he is probable for Saturday. So hopefully he's back. As you look at the other side of it, Ole Miss, several guys listed as questionable. Running back Matt Jones, wide receiver Trey Harris, guy we just talked about, listed as questionable, but I'm sure Ole Miss, if he is 85, 90%, he's going to go. I mean, you can't afford for him not to go if he is available in some aspect of the game.
One quick caveat I'll add to that, and we can keep going through this list here, but this is a must-win game for Ole Miss, and that is one of the things that does scare me. They do still have playoff potential with where their record's at, but they have to win out basically, and so they've got a lot to be playing for in these games. And so that's one thing that does, kind of scare me a little bit, is they got a lot on the line. I mean, just like everybody's got a lot on the line right now. Ours isn't necessarily playoff potential, but it is, bowl games, good bowl games, keeping your coach, your players want to play for your coach. We've kind of talked about it in some previous episodes on, what are the driving factors for teams to want to keep playing if they are eliminated from the playoffs when they had playoff expectations and things of that nature. But anyways, this is a big game for Ole Miss to have to win, if that makes sense. So to your point, if any of these guys that are questionable are even close to being able to play, I imagine they're going to play.
I was about to say, yeah, a guy like Trey Harris, you look at him on the season, 59 receptions, 987 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That's 28 more receptions than the next leading receiver and nearly double the yardage, as well as only 1 touchdown for their second leading receiver, Caden Lee, 31 catches for 488 yards and 1 touchdown. So, I mean, a guy like this, like I said, if he's going to be 85, 90%, he's probably going to play. I mean, that's just like we played Taylor Green at like 85, 90%. Pittman said the following game, his press conference after the Mississippi State game, said he wasn't 100% ready against LSU, that he couldn't run, that they weren't going to run him because they knew he wasn't ready. But he still played anyway because he was close and probably gave us the best option to win there. As we continue through this injury report, Matt Jones is their RB2, is questionable. You have one of their safeties, Andy Jaffe, questionable. One of their offensive linemen, Nate Calepo, is questionable. You've got several guys that are probable. Walter Nolan, defensive tackle for them, who's been big for them this year. Daquan Wright, they're one of their tight ends, as well as Caden Prescorn. Both those guys are listed as probable. 3 of their offensive linemen probable: Jaden Williams, Micah Pettis, and Jeremy James, all probable for this game. So several of those guys are probable. You can probably assume they're going to play. That one that I think everybody's circling, we definitely are, is Trey Harris. Is he able to get through the rest of practice week and not aggravate an injury? Or if he does play, I don't want to see a guy necessarily get hurt, but maybe he aggravates something against us and can't finish the game.
I'm not necessarily hoping that. Yeah, real quick, the only thing that I am, kind of got my fingers crossed for, if he does play, and I'm just fine with it if he does. Like I said, I kind of want to see him at their best. I'm not going to be mad if he doesn't play, but if he does, is he hindered enough that where he isn't just as explosive as he has been, and we are able to contain him a little bit more in our secondary than I imagine, you know what I'm saying? So that's going to be, some of the big things to watch for if he does play. And then another guy that's listed as probable, but if he's got some type of lingering injury, is he also as explosive as usual in Caden Prescorn? Very, very, very good tight end, NFL potential type tight end. He's going to be hard to contain, big body guy, and Jackson Dart throws this way all the time. So are we able to contain those 2 guys if they do play? And are they hindered enough that we're able to capitalize on that, catch up if we're behind on routes and things of that nature? I mean, there's a lot of those small caveat type things that can be make or break in this game for us. So I got my fingers crossed that even if those guys do play, they're not 100% enough to the point that they're just going to beat us off the line and have that explosive speed that Ole Miss always has. That's going to be tough for us to keep up with.
Yeah. I mean, we've kind of highlighted it a little bit too, as far as when you're thinking about keys for this game. we talked about it with the offensive line. Keys are going to be to control that line of scrimmage. I mean, our offensive line is going to have to be able to give Taylor time and make holes for Braylon Russell. You got to limit the explosive plays. I mean, that's what Ole Miss is known for, is those big explosive plays between Jackson Dart and Trey Harris, especially Jackson Dart. We know how he likes to gunsling the ball. We need to have a game like Tennessee. What did we do? We had efficient offense and sustained drives. We need to keep that offense on the sideline for Ole Miss, and have those 9-minute drives like we did against Tennessee, and come away with hopefully more than 3 points in that scenario. Convert on third downs is going to be a big one. We went 0 of 7 last week on the road against Mississippi State. That's going to be key. We did have a lot of big plays on first and second down last week, but I think that competition talent level is going to be much higher this weekend, so you're going to have to be able to convert. We talk about it all the time. Turnover battle is going to be key. And then the one that I want to see that killed us a little bit last week, we got to limit the penalties, especially on the defensive side of the ball. The number of drives last week where we forced Mississippi State into a third and long or a third down situation, got the stop on defense, but whether it was
ball face mask, pass interferences, there was a lot of things that extended.
We got to play clean in the sense of no turnovers, but clean as in we got to limit penalties. You can't give a team an automatic first down when you stopped them, was going to force a punt or even a tough fourth down play, and just hand them, here you go, here's 10, 15 yards and a first down. That puts more pressure on the defense, and they're having to stay on the field. And like Pigpen says here, our DBs didn't play 5 yards off the ball either. So, I mean, maybe T-Will learned a little bit about his guys in that LSU game, that we're going to have to play more aggressive and not give them space. And I think that's going to be crucial here against, Ole Miss.
Yeah, that's the tough part on defense. You're trying to find that happy medium of being able to press at the line to prevent these guys from being open on those dink and dunks, but then not give up the big play on the back end if they do beat you off the line and are able to squirt around you. It's a chess match. There's a reason why football is almost considered a chess game, literally. Because there's so much strategy that goes into how you're lining up against guys, how you're showing your pressures, how you're disguising your pressures. You're intentionally showing one thing, going to another, things like that, to try to trick QBs into throwing into coverage that they didn't think was going to be there. We've had good success at getting some picks and things like that when we've shown man, but then dropped into zone right at the last second, had a guy hanging in the flat on an out route or something, and he was able to undercut it. So things like that is going to be the strategy, is on how you beat this Ole Miss team. I don't think you can just play them 100% straight up and win every single down. There's going to have to be a lot of strategy, scheming, stunting at the line, defensive pressure, between whether it's the D line getting pressure on the quarterback or you're pressuring these receivers at the line to hinder their route and throw off the timing between them and Jackson Dart, because so many of their throws are timing based. And if they're a step behind where they're supposed to be, that can impact the throw. And you talked about it earlier on forcing mistakes. You were mainly hinting at like turnovers and things like that. If we're able to force any of those, that's great. Forcing mistake type throws, if you're able to get just enough pressure on Jackson to limit the way he's able to step into a throw or something like that. If you're able to bull rush a guy and get him kind of back into his throwing area, that's big too. May not really show up on the stat sheet as anything other than an incomplete pass per se, but those are mistakes, if you will, if you're able to affect his accuracy with your defensive line. So those are the things I'm going to be watching for. Obviously, if you can get sacks, if you can get strip sacks, whatever the case may be, force hits behind the line on handoff plays where you might get the ball to come out or something like that. Those are going to be big impact plays that can change this game. But there's also going to be plays where you can force mistakes where it's not necessarily a turnover, but it gets them behind the sticks or it gets them off schedule or something like that. And timing is going to be the biggest piece there. So how can we affect their timing? That's one thing Ole Miss is so critical on. And if they start to get in the rhythm and get their timing right, they start ramping up that timing, and you're on your heels on defense, and it's really hard to play with them then. So there's going to be a lot of things that everybody's got to play well at this in this game. You hit on it on penalties on the defense. I'm going to talk about it on penalties on the offense. We had some big plays against Mississippi State get called back due to illegal motions, things of that nature, false starts. We didn't have just a ton of false starts, but you did have 2 or 3 different formation penalties where you had a couple guys in motion at the same time, or a receiver was off the line when they were the only receiver on that hash mark. Can't have those types of mental mistakes. Got to play cleaner there because those killed a couple of offensive possessions for us. So those types of things won't really fly against Ole Miss as well as they did Mississippi State. It'll look more like an Oklahoma State type game where you make a couple of those mistakes and it'll cost you a win potentially, where we might even play better than Ole Miss or something like that. So that's the big stuff I'm looking for. But out of all of those things, the 2 things I want to see the most of is no turnovers and defensive pressure between the line and also the corners and stuff at the line of scrimmage to try to throw these guys off of their timing. That's going to be huge.
Yeah, I agree 100% there. That's going to be big. Hogman says Patrick Kudus has already been named a captain. You know, Arkansas went to the weekly captain thing.
And I like it.
This season, where your captains for this game, alongside Patrick Kudus, Alex Sanford, linebacker, Jordan Anthony, Quincy Rhodes, you know, guys that have been kind of flashing and progressing, especially talking a guy like Jordan Anthony has got speed. Getting him the ball is going to be key. And you look at him last week, such an amazing, accurate pass from Talon into the end zone to Jordan Anthony. That was a fantastic throw.
Heck of a catch too, man. That was an athletic catch.
Between 3 different DBs. Threaded the needle there a little bit, caught him in the end zone. So hopefully that's a sign that, you know, he's getting more comfortable with all these receivers. We didn't talk about it a whole lot, but you saw this game, I think it was a step forward as far as every single target wasn't trying to go to injure Armstrong. You saw him hit Armstrong, Satania, Tesla, Jordan Anthony, these tight ends. I mean, he was spreading the ball around, and I like that. Pigpen says, speaking of the coin toss, take the ball first and score it and set the tone. I mean, it's a good point. You know, 9 out of 10 times, if you win the toss, you decide to defer. But you saw it last week with Mississippi State. They were trying to do what Pigpen just said. They decided to take the ball first and wanted to try to go down and establish tone for the game. And luckily, we had Landon Jackson, you know, show up and, you know, get a strip sack, and Arkansas gets it in Mississippi State territory for a quick, you know, touchdown by Talon Green. But, you know, that's something to consider too. Maybe do we change that up if we win the toss? Do we say, all right, give us the ball first and see what we can do?
If nothing else, you try to replicate what you did against Tennessee, because this is going to be a similar game. I think Ole Miss has some differences compared to Tennessee. I don't think their D-line is as good. I don't know if their offense is I don't think Tennessee's offense is as good as Ole Miss. And so there's some slight tweaks, but there's a lot of similarities there in how you approach this game, because I think Jackson Dart is a similar style quarterback compared to Nico. Wants to throw, but is very mobile and can beat you with his legs, kind of how Nico is. Obviously, Jackson Dart's better, has a ton of collegiate experience, which is terrifying. But I think you look at this very similar to that, where what was one of the big keys as to why we were able to compete in that Tennessee game for all 4 quarters? The time of possession in the first half. To Pigpen's point here, if you get the ball first and you do have a long sustained drive, that just limits how much your defense has to play in that first half even more, especially if you're able to go out there and get maybe a 3 and out or something on Ole Miss's first possession, and then you go have another long drive. Boom, there goes the whole first quarter. Basically, that's all you need, and now your team is fresh for the rest of the game, essentially, because it's kind of been in that fourth quarter, if they've been on the field a lot, where this defenses start to give up big chunk plays. You can keep these guys fresh long enough, keep them off the field long enough to where they are still kind of within their wheelhouse in that fourth quarter. That's 100% of the reason why we beat Tennessee, in my mind, is the time of possession in the first half, set our defense up for success in the second half, kind of conversely to how we looked earlier in the season. So that is not a bad strategy, in my opinion. I wouldn't mind seeing that at all. I don't mind deferring either, and then you can kind of do the same thing at the start of the second half if you have to. But all in all, no matter how you slice it, you're going to have a couple, if not most of your drives be very long 8, 9, 10-yard type drives, 10-play type drives, where you're milking 5, 6 to up to 9 minutes off the clock if possible, or something like that, and limiting how many possessions Ole Miss has. If this does get into like a boat race shootout, I don't know if we're going to be the more consistent to score every possession, like Ole Miss might be. So there's going to have to be some limit to how many possessions they get.
Yeah, one of the points you said, Seth, Woopig said he likes setting the tone in the second half. So it's 50-50 whether, things like that. I think
the key is you have to execute in your drives to at least have a couple of them give your defense a break. You don't always want to score fast, I mean, realistically, because that makes life hard on your defense at the end. I mean, you don't want all of your drives to be 2 or 3 plays, 75-yard, you hit like 3 big bombs and a touchdown or whatever. You don't always want that, and we don't do that all the time. Let's be real. We're a running team more than anything, and Talen's, improving his throwing ability, and obviously Petrino's kind of calling more things strategically with play actions and stuff. But I think the emphasis on this game especially is going to be run the ball well and then let everything develop after that, because that's how you have those sustained drives.
Yeah. Give me that chess match also between Bobby Petrino and the mind of Lane Kiffin and, what he likes to do.
It's going to be crazy.
But should be another good game. We're excited for it. Hopefully Arkansas carries the momentum from this past weekend against Mississippi State forward and can get another win here and,
get bowl eligible this week. Makes the rest of the season even better. Yeah,
exactly. So before we get out here, we're running over here and do our quick SEC pick'em this week. One of the other games, Arkansas Ole Miss is the earliest game this week, kicking off at 11, unfortunately. But you jump over to the next game, Vanderbilt at Auburn. Auburn comes in favored by 7.
How?
Give me Vandy in this one. They have been playing well this year. They played Texas extremely close last weekend. They upset Bama. They even forced Missouri to overtime, even though we've established Missouri is not what everybody thought they were going into the season. But
didn't they beat Kentucky?
Yes.
Yeah. A team that beat Ole Miss. So, I mean, it's the SEC is weird this year, but yeah.
I was about to say, give me Vandy plus 7. Like, I'm not sold on Auburn. They're 3-5 for a reason. Peyton Thorne's the starter, but 12 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. He just hasn't looked great this year. Their backup that played against us and started didn't look great. I'm just not sold on this Auburn team.
I'm not either. I probably on paper, Auburn's more talented. I think they don't know their identity on really any side of the ball, honestly. They try to run the ball, but don't do that very well. They try to throw the ball, don't do that very well. It's kind of strange. I do think this is a weird spread. I'm surprised that Auburn's favored that much. I'm not surprised they're favored. Yeah, I'm not surprised they're favored, but I would have imagined it been like 1.5, 2 points, something like that, not 7. So that one kind of floors me. I think I'll take Vandy in this game too. You keep throwing that underdog chip on their shoulder for them with a spread like that, they're going to come out hungry, wanting to beat a team that they know is beatable. And I'm sorry, man. I don't think that Auburn defense is going to have a prayer stopping Vanderbilt's like wacky triple option,
Give me Diego
RPO
Pavia,
option.
man.
Pavia looks like he's running it, looks like he's pitching it, but then ends up he's still behind the line of scrimmage and he just threw a 25-yard bomb over your head. It's like you don't ever really know where they're going with the ball. Almost looks out of control at times, but it's really successful for them. So give me Vanderbilt in this one to at least cover, probably win, though.
Yeah, I agree. Pigpen here shouting out. Never thought we'd have to watch Kentucky film to beat Ole Miss, especially in football. I agree that is something that is insane. But as we continue on here, yeah, the SEC has been whacked this year, along with the rest of college football. The 1:30 game, Maine at Oklahoma. Both teams are 4-4, and it's such a interesting game that ESPN doesn't even necessarily give us a spread in this one. I mean, would it be the craziest thing in the world for somehow Maine to beat Oklahoma? I'm not going to pick Maine to beat Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma should win this game. This should be one of those games where they're playing the lesser opponent, should take care of business. But crazier things have happened. I mean, we saw South Alabama go in and beat Oklahoma State last year. So, Oklahoma, be on your toes. The way you've looked this year, I'm not going to rule it out, but I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt that you're the more talented team on paper and that you should get it done.
I completely agree. And I think they kind of maybe found a little bit of rhythm last week. Not to say that they've really figured anything out fully, but I think they understand, look, Jackson Arnold's the guy this year. We just got to start sticking with it from here on out. And let the chips fall where they fall. Sometimes it'll be good. Sometimes it may be bad. We don't really know. But to have any type of team chemistry and have anything to kind of springboard us forward, we're just going to have to stick with that and then hope for the best. And I think they'll get it done here. Don't get me wrong. Oklahoma's going to win this game most likely. But, yeah. Didn't know they had a football team either. Never really even heard of them.
Yeah, exactly. And your 2:30 time slot, you've got the kind of probably the – other than us and Ole Miss, the best game of the SEC. You have Florida playing Georgia in Jacksonville. Florida's been surprising somewhat this season as, compared to how they started the year, just looking terrible. Georgia bounced back, big win against Texas. That was huge. Florida, they lose Graham Mertz. DJ Lagway is the guy. They were relying on the running game. They're 4-3. I mean, Billy Napier's coaching for his job, and I mean, he's 2 wins away from being bowl eligible and maybe kind of saving his job. But, the spread's 16.5 here for Georgia. I'd take that all day. Georgia bounced back against Texas saying, hey, yeah, we lost against Alabama, but we're still Georgia. Kirby Smart had that defense firing on all cylinders. And sorry, Florida, this is going to be Georgia 100%, I think.
Yeah, I don't even think it's going to be close either. As much as I'd kind of like it to be close, I think Florida is too one-dimensional now. Georgia's defense is still really good. They're maybe not as good as they were a couple of years ago, whatever, but they're still really, really good. With them being more of a one-dimensional team, Kirby's going to know all the ways to stop the run for Florida. I don't think it's going to be close. I think Georgia wins this one by 20. Yeah, I kind of agree. I don't think you can have the mediocrity for that long at Florida that he has had and survive. I mean, let's be real. That Florida job, it's a little different than even the Arkansas job. There's
a lot of history down there.
There's a lot of history and a lot of different expectations, and a lot of money. And I don't know. I just feel like he's been very mediocre considering the talent that he's had available.
Yeah,
it's not going to fly forever. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a chance, if they don't make a bowl, he's probably it's a long shot. I still think that he keeps his job, but who knows? It could happen. We'll very much see. Move on to the 3:15 game. UMass at Mississippi State. Can Mississippi State get win number 2 this week as they are favored by 18 in this game? Michael Van Buren, they've slowly been getting better and better each week under Jeff Lebby. You know what kind of offense he can run, previously at Oklahoma and then Ole Miss before that. And he's got a dual threat quarterback and, made some great plays against us last week. You've got Coleman, their star freshman wide receiver that Landon talked about last week. I mean, I think this is a game that, Missouri beat UMass few weeks ago, and I think Mississippi State probably gets win number 2 this week against UMass.
I hope they do. Honestly, I don't really have a lot of bad blood against that Bulldogs team at all. I don't love Jeff Lebby. I think it's just because of where he's used to coach, in years past. So I still got some sour taste in my mouth just around that. But this is a win they really need. And to your point, they're figuring things out on offense. They're going to score enough points to win this game. Can their defense get just a handful of stops and they're going to win this game? So, I would take Mississippi State and probably the points. Honestly, I think they'll do enough on defense and do more than enough on offense to cover.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's one of those guys. Like Pigpen said here, Mississippi State's quarterback Michael Van Buren isn't that bad of a quarterback. I mean, it's a tough situation that he's in, having to take over as a freshman.
And their line isn't just the best. Landon Jackson everybody exposed a lot of their issues on the line perspective, and so it's a tall order for him to stand in there and throw accurate balls when he's getting hit from behind and fumbling the ball a couple times during the game. That gets in the back of his head, and so that's hard to play in that environment.
Yeah. So that will be interesting. Hopefully, like we said, nothing against the Bulldogs. Hopefully they can figure out have a successful rest of the season now that, we've taken care of business against them. And they can find a way to maybe get some things going there. The biggest implication games up next, 6:30. Texas A&M heads to South Carolina. They got a big win last week at Kyle Field as LSU came to town, and they seemed to rattle Garrett Nussmeier, that defense and that pass rush for Texas A&M. They have one of the better defensive lines in the SEC and the country as a whole. I think they come in favored 2.5 on the road against South Carolina. That Beamer ball down there in Columbia. Lawrence Sellers hasn't looked great. He's looked great at times for South Carolina, but as a whole, he still only has 968 yards on the season passing, 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Some games that they lost that probably should have won or had a chance to win. You think about Bama, a few weeks ago they force, they get the score. Unfortunately, they'll get the 2-point conversion, kick the onside, get the recovery, and they have a chance to beat Alabama at home. And he throws a pick, and then they almost beat
LSU
earlier in the season. So some just bad luck for South Carolina, but call me the biggest South Carolina fan this week as they play Texas A&M. Would love to see them give A&M a second loss and first SEC loss in Williams-Brice Stadium.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to be rooting for the Gamecocks pretty big in this one, but at the same time, I think A&M is going to win it. I think A&M's defense is going to be.
Let's go Rocket Sanders.
Yeah, true, but I got a bad feeling that A&M's defense they're trending in the right direction, especially even compared to when we played them. They're better now than they were when we played them. Granted, we are too. Their defense has really been playing quite well over the last few weeks, and I think that's one of the main reasons they've gotten some wins. And then they've they've still had some weirdness at quarterback.
I was about to say that's a question for me.
That's a big question for me, but I think they're they're at this crux where when they need to beat a team that's good at defending the run, they'll throw can't remember his name now.
Wegman or Marcel Reed?
Wegman. Yeah, Connor Wegman can throw the ball quite a bit better. If they need to throw the ball well, or something like that against a team that's got a better run defense, they have the ability to do that. If they play in a team that can't really stop the run well, they have the ability to throw a dual threat running quarterback out there, as well as a couple of good running backs, and their O-line's really not terrible. So this A&M team's kind of versatile in a funky way. I don't really love 2 quarterback schemes, and I don't think they're trying to really be 2 quarterback scheme, but it's just kind of the way the cookies crumbled for them. But their defense has been so good, it hasn't really mattered. So give me A&M in this one to win. I don't want them to, but I think their defense is going to cause South Carolina fits all game long because this A&M defense has really come a long way this year, and they're playing quite well.
Yeah, I think you're right there. That's my question. Personally, me, if I'm A&M, I'm rolling with Marcel Reed. He's got you 4 of your 7 wins this season.
True.
He has to come in with an injured Connor Wegman early in the season. Played against us, and I mean,
he learned a lot during that game and the subsequent stuff. So I think he's better now than he was even then at knowing the reads on handoffs and pulling it and stuff like that. I think he's adjusted to SEC speed a little bit better now. So I would, to your point, I think I would trust him to come in and run the ball all over this Gamecocks defense that's been susceptible.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting for sure. I think that's what makes it tough, I think, for South Carolina is they have to game plan. Who are you game planning for? Connor Wegman or Marcel Reed, or you haven't tried to game plan for both? So, final game in SEC play this week. You have Kentucky headed to Neyland Stadium in Knoxville to take on the Volunteers. Tennessee favored by 16.5 in this game. I think Tennessee probably gets it done here at home. They've had some big home wins this season. They knocked off Alabama a few weeks ago. They're sitting at number 7, 6-1 on the season, 3-1 in conference play. If they want to keep their hopes for playoff contention alive, then they're going to have to continue here. And Kentucky's just looked bad. I mean, they've had some games where they have the ability to make games sloppy. You saw that against Georgia. You saw that against their win at Ole Miss. So I think that's the thing. Does Tennessee play into that and play sloppy against Kentucky? Then Kentucky can have a chance. But if Tennessee can play like the team they did, against Alabama, then they probably get the job done here. And I say that 16.5 is probably accurate. I'm going to take Tennessee in this one to get the job done, especially at home in Neyland Stadium. That stadium can get rocking, especially when Tennessee is having success.
Yeah, I'll take Tennessee in this one too. I think Kentucky they still are okay, but I think they had a better defense earlier on in the season before people figured out how to beat it as much. You think back a couple of years ago when we had Barry Odom, we were running that 3 down front and dropping 8 people in coverage, and it was giving some quarterbacks fits until people figured out how to kind of dink and dunk and then run the ball around the edges and stuff like that, and then it didn't do anything. So that their defense is different, but I think people have kind of figured out how to mitigate some of the things they were doing well early on that caused some of those uglier games. I think Tennessee handles this one at home. They've figured some things out on their own, and Kentucky, in my opinion, has kind of trended the wrong direction. So, especially on offense, their offense is really, really not good.
I was about to say, we may be we're talking about a whole different game if you say Kentucky rolled the dice against Georgia, gets the win there, and they beat Ole Miss. I mean, maybe you're talking about a different situation, but right now they seem to, like you said, trending not in the best direction.
They just can't score. That's the thing. I mean, their defense could probably hold them in games if they had a better offense and their defense wasn't on the field all the time and stuff like that. But to me, their offense is just not there yet.
I was about to say, Brock Vanderdrift
we'll see.
Has not looked great. Transferred over from Georgia to kind of take the starting job at Kentucky, and just hasn't looked great this year. So,
growing pains. But Kentucky, Stoops has been there a long time for a reason. It's not necessarily because they've won championships, but it's because they've been at least consistent. They're close to consistent this year, but there's a little bit of a downgrade. But I think it'll be kind of similar to Pittman last year. We've been kind of consistent. We had a little bit of a down year, but then hopefully, they bounce back kind of how we've, in my opinion, bounced back this year. I could see that happening for Kentucky next year, but we'll see.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So, there you have, that's the SEC slate. Arkansas has a big game against Ole Miss this weekend. Hopefully we can come out on top, become bowl eligible this week. If that's not motivation for this team and, how hard they've been playing this year, I think that's something that might go overlooked a little bit this year, is this team is really playing hard for Coach Pittman. And I think maybe some people overlook that with some of the tough losses and stuff we've had. But if you look at this team, they play hard for Coach Pittman. And I think that says something, that's been getting national media attention. Like, this Arkansas job as a whole is not an easy job, because you're having to deal with not a ton of in-state talent. You're having to recruit against guys, your Georgia, your Alabamas, especially in the SEC. But it's like somebody said this weekend. I was watching something. I think it was the Chuck and Bo show. They were talking about Sam Pittman is kind of what Arkansas needs, and he's a guy that wants to be here. I think that says something, and the kids can see that, and that's why I think these guys are playing so hard, because they know he wants to be here and lead Arkansas to success. So hopefully these guys keep playing hard. This offensive line looks great this weekend, and Arkansas can get the win over Ole Miss at home and become bowl eligible. And we can dust off Larry and
get the old bowling ball out, man. This would be the best team to do it against, in my opinion, too. If we can get bowl eligible against these guys, I think it'll taste even sweeter than just being bowl eligible, after Louisiana Tech or something like that. So, got my fingers crossed hard. I always love playing Ole Miss. Got a bunch of buddies that I talk to that are Ole Miss fans, and it's always fun, kind of the trash talk that goes on back and forth. So this will be a big game for us, especially if we can pull it off. Got to play clean, and got to get defensive pressure. Those are the keys to the game in my mind. But it's going to be a good one. It's going to be interesting to see the fan turnout for a morning game. Finally, that's actually at Don W. Reynolds, though. So fans turn out if you're going. Get there early. Get lathered up early. if that makes sense. So
I was about to
make
say,
this
if you're
game
not
loud.
going, send Seth your tickets.
Yeah, no kidding. But anyways, appreciate all you guys tuning in too. There's always a lot of good interaction here on the YouTube page. So appreciate y'all jumping in and having a good time with us on these shows.
Exactly. And before we get out here, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Really hit that like and subscribe button. Tell your friends we're so close to 500 subscribers on YouTube. That'll be a big mark for us to hit, as we continue to grow here. Win or lose, we'll be right back here Sunday to recap the game. We'll talk some Arkansas basketball. As we mentioned, they take on TCU Friday, so hopefully it's another double win weekend for Arkansas between basketball and football. But with that being said, we're going to get out of here, and we'll see you guys on Sunday for our recap show.